I am going to get everyone to introduce themselves, actually. But just before that, I thought it might be just worth just saying for anyone just that would appreciate the clarity what we're talking about when we're talking about millennials. So that would be anyone right now between the ages of 29 to 44. But also I think what we're talking about today also has relevance to Gen Z. So that would be anyone who's currently aged 13 to 28. So we're touching on that as well. Yeah, we have a real mix on this panel. We have, spoilers, we've got content creators, presenters, directors, author, award-winning author, commissioner. So we've got a nice mix. Let's just, one by one, just introduce who you are, what your name is, and what you do or make that's kind of relevant to the panel today.
Hi, everyone. My name's Indy. I run a podcast with my friend here, Doctor. Indy and Doctor. Meant to sound like Indy and Doctor, but it just sounded really weird, but we kept through it. I convinced him to do a podcast. He didn't want to do one. Over the years, he's warmed up to that idea, and we've seen a lot of impact in our space of people who are Sikh, or Sikh as we like to call them, brown, Desi culture, which has been great. I'm a marketer by day, and his occupation is pretty obvious. He's a doctor by day and night, but I'll pass you the mic. Here you go.
You haven't left me much to say, really. I mean, that's exactly what we do. I am a real doctor. Number one question I get asked by fans and followers. And like Indy said, trying to impact younger people in our kind of space and religion so they can get more involved and ask questions, have a safe space to ask questions. And that's pretty much it. We love what we're doing and just having more and more impact.
Hi, my name is Swarzy. I'm a radio presenter on BBC Radio 1 and BBC Radio 1 Extra. I'm on early breakfast from 7 to 10 a.m. on Saturday, so for any early birds in the room, come find me. Or BBC Radio 1 from 6 to 7 a.m. I became a Christian when I was 14 years old. My mum and dad are not Christians, and yeah, just like God absolutely crashed into my world. And so love hearing what God may be doing and love putting that on radio. So we just did the Christmas show, we just did the Easter show with a live choir. They sounded gorgeous. I wish I could sing. But yeah, definitely loving hearing about faith and putting faith front and center, whether that's on stages or on radio. And so, yeah, love being on this panel. Thanks very much.
Hey, I've got this one. Hey, I'm Lamorna. I'm a writer and a journalist. My background is in anthropology, and my first book was about the Cornish fishing industry, and then the natural follow-on from that was to write about Christianity. But so I've spent the last 4 or 5 years having known almost nothing about as little as you could know about religion, learning about it, interviewing 50, 60 people around Britain about their experience of Christianity and faith and what's happening today. And so that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Desi Paktiazay. I'm the BBC's head of religion and ethics for television, which means that I commission all the output that you'll see on TV to do with religion and ethics. And I'm really excited and interested, particularly today, to learn a bit more about the different means that we can communicate stories about faith and belief to different demographics, different age groups, and just bring different people to the conversation.
Okay, and the ominous empty chair. We do have Islah, who might appear midway. I think he's just had a bit of travel issues. But he's the founder of the Corner Shop Network, specifically making content for Muslim and ethnic minority communities. So he might be joining us. Great, and just to say, I've obviously got my questions. Feel free to ask questions to each other, and we're going to throw to the audience nearer to the end as well with your questions, so be ready with those. I just wanted to set the scene, I guess, by asking a question that I get asked a lot, which is, do young adults, young people, care about religion? And maybe a step further, like, is there an appetite for faith-related content? Maybe, I don't know, Lamorna, just with your kind of book and the premise of that, whether you wanted to kind of start on that.
Yeah, I don't think humanity changes in one particular way, which is that we're beings of longing, that we have this sense of worlds that we want and looking for better worlds and beauty and more connectivity. Maybe that feels more like desperate or acute at the moment because, talking about our generation, we all tend to move from flat to flat to flat. We struggle to find spaces that are communal spaces. Religious spaces have always been extraordinary for that, of bringing people together. Again, I know a little about Christianity and so little about other faiths. So just on Christianity, my sense is that our generation feels incredibly different from this like new atheist generations above us, this sense of arguing Christianity away on scientific grounds, saying religious people are foolish. I think we all grow up, the schools we go to, in this really like pluralist, hey, you made it.
He was here all along.
That it means it would feel so ridiculous not to take people's faith seriously in our generation when people around you everywhere believe, and more than 50% of the world believes in a religion. And so I think there is this sense of like, number one, always being longing beings, looking for something, looking for meaning, trying to understand things, having these ancient religions that have been talking about these things for thousands of years, not needing to let go of everything from the past, and then also just coming into contact with more people who are religious, and then thinking, okay, well, in my background, what would that faith have been? I guess for me personally, it'd be Christianity. Why have I, just decided that the one version that I've heard is maybe the more right-wing, maybe the more conservative version of it, and I've decided, therefore, I'm completely against it. And then that, for me, that felt naive and this like lack of curiosity. And I just, as I was going out in my car, trying to interview people all over the place, I met so many young people who have this appetite for faith, for belief, who are questioning, who are as filled with as many doubts as they are with certainties. And that was very exciting to me.
Maybe Swarzy, for you, I mean, your audience is national and, spanning all religions, and you kind of sometimes get to touch upon subjects of a religious nature. And what do you see in terms of like the reception to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with your point of searching and looking. And I guess at 14, I wasn't looking for God, but praise God came looking for me, because I got caught shoplifting in this crazy shop and just thought, oh my gosh, I'm in so much trouble. And literally the shopkeeper shut the door, and I was like, oh my God, I'm in trouble. My mom's Caribbean, it's over for me. And literally, as I said, God, I don't know who you are, but if you're real, get me out of this situation. The guy just let me go, and I found this youth group with 100, it was about maybe 14 to 21, but all of the skills, all of the things that I've learned now have come from great leaders and great youth leaders. And when I meet people who have a similar story, it is a thing of like, what was going on in your life and how did God just crash in with mercy and grace and just come and get you? And those stories are just so human. Like I can't deny my story. I didn't make it up. I really wouldn't have made up that story. And so when you go on radio and you just have a little glimpse of it, there are so many people who respond. So we just did the Christmas show, and it spanned from the US artists to the UK artists. And, you've got the good old Kurt Franklins, you've got a good old, Fred Hammond, all the classics. But then there's lots of Christian young artists making music that are blowing up on socials, that when you play it on radio, people are like, yeah, we love this music and it's good music. So whether you're of faith or no faith, people love good music. And then, we've done stuff with BBC Radio 4 and BBC Radio 2 recently for Easter. And so it's just amazing that when people say, oh, young people are not interested, often young people are pushing this, like, come on, we're ready to go. Like, where are you? Where can we partner with? So it's been really interesting, actually, just to see the enthusiasm and the engagement, both on radio and off radio, just being led by so many young people.
And maybe Desi, are you seeing anything in terms of, I don't know how much kind of data you get, but in terms of like a younger engagement in the content that you're putting out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the method that we're delivering those stories. I completely echo what you're saying, that human story, faith as a lived experience, is a really good way to connect people to the content. Going back to what we heard earlier when Mark Thompson talked about Aristotle, I feel very highbrow and learned now. I've heard the talk. That it's not always about trying to bring an audience through the logos, through the rationale, through the facts, the figures, but through the ethos and the pathos. I think that's where we're often seeing younger audiences connect, where they either feel that they are seeing something really relatable because it is an incredible human story, or because it's access to a world that they know nothing about and are really interested in. So I'm really encouraged to see what younger audiences are coming to. And I think, as I said, it's about the method that we're communicating that in. So linear obviously is really important. That sitting on iPlayer to be accessible for much longer is crucial. But also, what can we do on social media that's going to tell people that this story is even there? And I think that's a really exciting space for us to be working in.
Yeah, so let's delve a little bit into like the specifics of content that's being made and what you guys are making. Maybe, Islah, maybe you want to start for us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the Corner Shop Network, maybe in particular, and some of the stuff that you've put out, especially kind of touching on faith-related topics?
Yeah, first of all, sorry I'm late. In my culture, it's called Asian timing. The only time we're on time is at the airport. But yeah. So I'm a filmmaker and an actor. My art is in the world of film, and that's the kind of medium that I use to portray messages, kind of give ethical content out there, because I learned very quickly that young people aren't watching TV. They're not engaged in anything. If they do, they go to the cinema, but really they're scrolling on their phones. So I chose to make my films for that platform, starting all the way back from 2011 on YouTube, all the way to now, to TikTok, to Instagram. And just an example of the type of content I make a Muslim-friendly comedy sketch show called The Halalians. And what it is, it's basically, it turned into, I'd say, the Muslim version of The Office. And there's a sketch that I do every year, I repost it every year, and it's called Asking for the Day Off for Eid. So the Muslim calendar is on the lunar calendar, and we don't actually know when the day of Eid falls, so every year it always changes. And we don't know when Eid is coming until maybe like 2 days before. So you can imagine when you're working a corporate job and you need to book time off, it's like asking for the day off for Christmas and you don't know when it is. So I made a sketch around that, asking my manager for the day off, and all the comedy was in there, but it was also educating, and every year it goes viral. And I posted it the other day because Eid was just this weekend, and it got 3 million views overnight. And that's just that one time. Again, it gets 1 million views every single year. And that's just one of the sketches I make. So I like to kind of make content that everyone can relate to or learn from. And in a world where obviously we're seeing it all over the news, where there's so much division, there's so much, there's so many things we don't want to see. And I think unity should stand on top of all of that. So hopefully that answers the question.
Great. And Indy and Dr. Jazz, tell us a bit about your podcast, who especially is maybe listening to that, or, I mean, also it's kind of on different platforms as well, so you're getting different audiences, aren't they? And how you bring faith into it. I know you've got a kind of percentage almost that you work to, so maybe just unpack that for us.
I'll answer the second part, you answer the first part, yeah? So on that, what we're finding is that, I was listening to a podcast the other day and it's talking about how AI is coming and job displacement is going to come. What is the purpose and the meaning for life? And meaning and purpose now is going to take on a different, greater question for young people especially. And so what we have found is, initially when we went out 5 years ago, started a podcast, we didn't actually know who our audience was going to be. But you get market research, which is the messages that come back in, you've had an impact in this way. And we started to see that when we sprinkled in, and that was the key for us, sprinkled in religious content, the reception was really good, because the line between becoming a sort of a lecture-based kind of preacher, this is what you should do, people to switch off, plus it's short-form content, so our reels are, like a minute long. To have great engagement, there has to be something that's relatable and very interesting to the person. So I guess what we focus on is, how do we take what's in scripture, but make it applicable to today? But in short, so if we've got an hour episode, we might have one thing we talk about, but that one thing for that one person or many people becomes the nugget, and it's enough. And it's not overwhelming them to the point they're thinking, oh, this is so much knowledge. And then when I'm in person, I've had so many people, and I always ask the question, what is it you like most about our content? And the people that come back and say, when you do the faith stuff, it's because you've got people who are already into Sikhism, quite deep into it, and they'll go to more specialist channels. But people like us, we're kind of midway in life, we're having kids, we don't really know, our parents haven't really taught us, we feel too shy to go to the Gurdwara to ask these things. But then you guys are discussing in English and you make it approachable for us. And then that gives us the kind of fuel to say, oh, okay, let's make some more content around this. So I guess, yeah, that's it. You want to talk about the demographics and who we appeal to?
So weirdly, you would think with the type of content that we run, it's based only around Sikh people. It's not. It's an eclectic mix of all brown people. What we're also seeing is we have a lot of friends from all faiths as well. So we've got Muslim following, Hindu following, because our language is Punjabi. And in Punjabi, you have Punjabi Hindus, Punjabi Muslim, Punjabi Sikh. So you have people blending under one umbrella. So when we put a piece of content out, I think that was our first thing that ever went viral, was how do you eat your chapati, aka roti? How do you eat it? And we didn't think it was anything scientific behind it, but it's just, how do you peel this off and break up your food? And the amount of people that messaged us saying, oh, I do it this way, I do it this way. And I was thinking, I put so much effort into the most complicated, nuanced, intellectual topics, and this piece of food went viral. Like, this doesn't make sense. But having that mix of that and also bringing people in to understand who we are, because Sikhs only make up 1% of the population in the UK, but we have a really big footprint in terms of, if you see somebody like him or Dow at the back, you know that that's a Sikh man, because our parents came here during the 70s, 80s, they established a really good community here, and they've just kept at it. And we're quite proud of that. But because we've taken jobs in, say, medicine, or for myself, going into the corporate world and going into marketing, we're in unfamiliar spaces. And when you're going to talk to people, places of worship about it, they only know hard graft. So now there's like a new struggle for our religious group of, okay, how do we grow into this new world of corporatism, and how do we find our own spaces and exchange points of view and try and get through the common challenges that everybody else has faced. So that might be a topic of the future, actually. Just completely found one on the spot. But yeah, we really enjoyed it. The demographics are actually working mums that listen to us, which we would have never thought. I would have thought, yeah, I'm making content for someone that's like me. Guys like us watch short form content. Mums listen to the long form content. That's something I could never have told you, but it's something that's really interesting to us. And I think it's because a lot of the mums see our habits as, oh, my husband, he does that same thing. I kind of get why he does that now. So maybe we're decoding things. Putting the toilet seat down. Why do we leave clothes on the floor? Like all these benign things, but it's just really helpful. And we have a great time doing it.
And I think with the faith stuff, it's one thing is about like what's the content that's being covered, and then it's also like the tone in which we're doing it, like you're saying about the humor is important for the Corner Shop Network, and with you guys, I don't know if you want to talk about it, just the dynamic that you have, and I think it's very personal, and it's also between the two of you, you've got kind of, if I can say this, Jazz is kind of the more maybe knowledgeable, or I don't know if it's a role you play or if that is true, and Indy, you're kind of coming at it with that kind of inquisitive, and is that quite deliberate, or is that just naturally happened, or?
She's saying you're thick. Translation there. I think what is beautiful, what you described there, Jessie, is exactly what is, again, not planned, and that is the beauty of it. Indy has become the surrogate for all the listeners. He asks the questions they all want to ask. And, okay, I'm a little bit maybe more knowledgeable on the language and the religious side, but by Indy asking it, we can really then answer it, not in a way which is taught in our religious kind of upbringing, which is very kind of, this is what it is, and that's what it is, and you can't ask why. Now, Indy will be like, yeah, but why do we believe that? And, you know, what is the significance of that? And should it still be a thing? And we'll probe and sort of question it, which is what people want now. And then they can form their own opinion. I think what's important about what we do also is we definitely don't try and tell people what to believe and how to believe it. And I think that's really important, giving people the space to just explore their own faith. And I found personally in my life, there are points in your life where, you know, bad things happen and crisis happens and you do look for meaning, and faith is one of those places where it's just a natural kind of, you go to. And I found that there's points where you're very strong with your faith, and then you go to university and you just lose all faith, and then you come out and get married and your faith goes back up again. So, yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about kind of the different digital platforms or social media platforms here. Maybe, Lamorna, I'm just thinking about, there was a bit in your book where you talked about a friend, Max, who I think kind of part of his like faith journey was that he watched like long form Orthodox priest videos, I think. So what kind of, from your conversations, you were kind of all these people you're meeting across the UK, what were you hearing about different videos maybe that were being consumed, different types of content online that young people were watching?
I was worried when you went to me first for social media, because I reckon I'm like the least literate in it here. I'm like, just bought a brick dumb phone because I was like, I can't handle social media anymore. That's not the point. I found, so this is someone that I met, and he had been really struggling during the pandemic, as so many people did. Also, maybe he was a young guy who he'd said he was really interested in conspiracy theories, or very much believed a lot of conspiracy theories, and was feeling like really lonely and kind of ostracized. And he started watching the YouTube videos of a northern Greek Orthodox priest, and found those messages really compelling. And that was the thing that then brought him to church. I would say that personally, watching some of those videos myself, that again, this sense of someone speaking with this real authority, but saying a lot about, women as these kind of like objects of lust, and like the only answer is to turn away from women. And I found some of the content quite misogynistic. And I think that as we know with social media, with anything, there's like the beauty of it and this thing of getting to hear voices that we absolutely should be hearing and have not been hearing in the traditional media landscape. But there is also the other side of it too, where of course, when all of us can be publishing content, there are kind of like darker corners of that. At the same time, then I saw completely other things where there would be young people who have recently converted to Christianity, and it's like a space where they can do like Bible readings and try and work out what they think about the Bible, and do great YouTube stuff and meet people from other parts of the country who have a similar background from them, who maybe have parents who have like different religions, and they can talk about that together. So I think, as ever, social media as a kind of refraction of what our world is like has the capacity for great and terrible things all the time.
Maybe, Islah, I don't know if you want to talk about the content that you post, where you post that, and where you see kind of differences maybe in the interaction or who's interacting.
100%. I mainly post long-form stuff on YouTube, and there's a great interaction there. Some people kind of discuss, and mostly positive. Instagram's very good for community. Facebook is racist. I honestly don't know why all the racists are on Facebook. I don't know why, but they're there. Honestly, it's hard to tell. Like sometimes you like, just like you guys, like you posted about the roti, right? The most craziest thing that you just don't expect goes viral, and other times it doesn't. Like I don't know if you guys remember in Ramadan just gone, every year for the past 3 years, we've had Ramadan lights in Piccadilly Circus. So just like the Christmas lights that go up, we have Ramadan lights now, and we have like a launch night for it. I posted a video. And I was, just celebrating it, and the flood of comments was all just racist. So you just don't know what can go viral for the right or wrong reasons. And like you said, there's corners of social media that are very dark, and sadly there are a lot of users on there that abuse it. But we can't, the block button is there for a reason. I tend to use it quite often. Yeah. Yeah.
Just on your point about it being wielded for good and for ill, and you've both talked about experiences of the two happening. When we recently did Eid Live on BBC One, first time a UK broadcaster's ever shown that service live, we got the most incredible feedback across social media. I was being sent, not through BBC TikTok, but people filming it on television, cutting it together and then sharing that on their socials, but really positively. And I was braced for what you've talked about experiencing as well, thinking we're likely to get a lot of that. Surprisingly, we didn't. And the response was one of real, I never thought I'd see this on the BBC. So it just goes to show, maybe it's just one of those things you can't predict, and we just have to deal with it as, no.
On BBC Saturday Kitchen, we got invited to celebrate Eid on there, and we all cooked a different dish from different ethnic backgrounds. And we were all scared, like, what's going to happen in the backlash? It was wonderful. People loved it. It was hilarious. It was comedic. People actually didn't realize Muslims can be funny. I guess because, the prime show that we have is obviously Sky News. So you see a lot of that on there. And we're not always portrayed in the best light. So it is nice that sometimes mainstream media does portray us in a good light, and people like us are posting positive things out there about our faiths. But like I always say, it's all about unity. End of the day, like, we all believe in God, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, in the Bible it does say that my Father's house has many rooms. So for me, that's just like we all came from one place. It's just different shades.
Yeah, I really love that. But I was thinking about even as you were saying Facebook and Instagram, and I was like thinking, one's bad, one's good. They're both owned by Mark Zuckerberg, who's like with Trump now. And I was thinking, like, what I found with a lot of people about social media is that maybe more young people are also thinking about like religious houses, like going to a space, going to your mosque, going to synagogue, going to church, going to temple, because it's actually this space where you can be with humans again. And actually it's a space where we relegate all forms of like technology, which always feels like, for me, it feels like a relief when I go to my church now, to be like, here's somewhere where I know I'm going to have at least an hour of interaction with someone outside of this like complicated world. I know, like, how complicated you feel about that, of this sense of social media, we're not in charge of it. It's like the tech bros who are like, I don't know, controlling and taking over our ability to attend to one another. But then I guess that's just like the water we have to swim through. Yeah. But then I guess, do you think social media can be a sacred space for like... Sacred? Yeah. Like, can you make a sacred space in social media?
Funny enough, I created a show called The Last Supper Club because I love to cook, love to cook, and it came about because I was reading through the Gospels and like Jesus loved to have dinner with his friends. And I was like, I love to have dinner with my friends. And so we created this safe space we went to Canary Wharf, and God was amazing. The events lady gave us 2 months worth of budget at Christmas to just shoot this show. And so we created 4 episodes. And you know what? Like, I just think we was able to grab other communities from across the world in the comment section and just through DMs and everything. You think, oh, people are having dinner whilst watching us have dinner. And that was like really, really cool. But you do feel sacred in the sense of, things like we wouldn't put out, if someone was sharing something, you have the power to say, do you want to have this online? Do you not? And of course, everyone has their right to say yes or no to that. So I think if you are in control of it and you can control and feel gracious enough for someone to say, yeah, I do want to share this or I don't want to share that, that was really, really good. So yeah, I do think there is a place. And ironically, people, we did just jump straight into the Bible. We were like, Jesus was born in Nazareth. What was his postcode? Like, what do you think was going on at that time? And all of those questions that you think, how can you ask that? Where would you ask that? People in the comments are like, I've been wondering about that. And so you gain a community of people who have similar questions to you, who feel safe because you look and feel safe on camera asking exactly the same questions. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and not to shy away from at all.
I think you can make your social media algorithm is what you make it to be or what you want it to be. Mine is dominated by sports, a little bit of political commentary, and then occasionally I'll go into incognito and just find something completely random and splurge on that. Everyone's own content online is what you interact with. The sooner we understand that, the more you can curate the space you want to see and see the things you want to be a part of. I've got friends of ours that have said, I haven't seen your stuff appear on my feed. I said, I'm not in charge of the algorithms, but go onto something and go and like it, and then you might see something again that's like it again in the future, because algorithms are so tailored now to keeping somebody on the phone for the right or wrong reasons. 9 times out of 10, the wrong reasons. So you can make your own space of it. It's just really difficult to keep pulling yourself out of that rabbit hole you've fallen down and say, okay, why am I doing this again? After a meeting, I'll grab my phone, I'll look and I'm like, wait. Why have I just done that? Like, it's been 10 minutes. I can leave my phone to the side and carry on with doing some work. And I'm sure everybody else has been guilty of the same thing. So you can make it to what you want it to be. I found app timers to be really well. I don't know if anybody else has found the same. Or leaving my phone in the other room, literally in the other room, just all day.
What are some of the challenges or consideration, we touched upon it a bit, but when it comes to making faith-related content for millennials, what do you guys find are some of the challenges around that? I
think it's taking it to, so for example, if I'm making it on social media, I'm in control. I decide what I can do, how I can edit it, what time I post it, if I want to change the title. I think it's taking it to another level. So for example, if I was to pitch a faith-related idea to a broadcasting company, there's so many layers there that I have to go through. It's not so straightforward. And suddenly, you get told your idea is not relevant, or, it doesn't relate to certain people. But I mean, you can't say that because there's like how many billion Muslims in the world and how many billion Christians. It doesn't really make sense to me. So I think that's like a difficulty when you want to take it from social media to the industry. And the reason you want to take it to the industry is because you want to spread a positive message to a wider audience. And that's why we want to take it to events and stuff. But I do see a lot of progression. I mean, we just had Eid in Trafalgar Square with the Mayor of London, which I hosted 2 years ago as well. And I've never seen Eid be celebrated in the middle of central London, which is incredible. So there are areas where I see it progressing. I think Donald Trump once said Eid Mubarak once. Yeah, so there's progression somewhere.
I guess one of the other things we've found is, and you guys probably find this when you post, is there's obviously hate, right? So you get hateful comments, and you talked about blocking earlier. I think one thing that we actively try and do now, because I said to me, is look, if we post some content and we get 100 people saying, yeah, really good content, I was like, it's not really serving as many people as we could. We actually do want good discourse. And so now what we found is when you do have people who write what appears to be hateful comments, then actually not being angry in the response or being sarcastic, but actually trying to interrogate them intellectually serves everybody really well, because then you actually do really get to the root of what do they actually believe. Because a lot of these people that I've found, that they have a belief, it's not based on anything, but it's what they've been told to believe. And then you kind of bring a bit of facts into it, and you say, well, have you thought about this, and have you thought about this? And actually then you start seeing other people start commenting as well. And I find that in the comment section is actually a really, really kind of not talked about kind of thing that we were doing, but it's actually helping a lot of people.
And some people that are afraid to ask see someone else ask it in a comment and they scroll through the answers. So they might be shy to comment themselves, but someone else has done it for them. So it does create kind of a discourse. I don't know if that's what you've experienced as well.
And then you get all these likes on this thing, and you're like, yeah, that's what I was thinking. And then, that's what I wanted to say. And yeah, exactly. And I think that discourse, real discourse, which sometimes, because when you're in person, people think it, but they don't have the confidence to say it or question it. But when, these keyboard warriors that want to say it, faceless profiles, fine, they're saying it. I'd rather they say it so we can start addressing this hate now in spaces openly rather than with anger. Just like, why do you think that? And that's been really, really we had a lot of progress in that kind of field.
To your point about being fed, once you start, the algorithm feeds you the things that it knows you're interested in, and that's great if you're a decent person who's interested in, good things. But how do we cut through if what we're talking about really is in the space of religious literacy and about helping other people, different communities understand more about different faith perspectives, different belief systems, secular ones as well. How do we cut through to people who perhaps have formed a very rigid opinion or no opinion with more information, with more awareness about different communities, and to the point that has been raised a couple of times today about how divided sometimes the conversation can feel and how factional. Religious literacy has a really brilliant role to play in that, but it's difficult when you're trying to communicate on social. A lot of your content is aimed for that. How do we make sure that that gets in front of people who may not have an algorithm that feeds it to them?
Sometimes getting off social media and in the streets, and I think there's a phrase that people say, which is, you need to touch grass. I think about that a lot. I actually do need to go out and touch grass and go and explore the world, because as angry as you get online, you go out in the world, you're like, there's no fights in the street. Everything's okay. Everything's working fine. But what we've noticed is if you think back to the fundamentals of things that are really popular at the moment, like meditation, that's come from pretty much every religion. If you think of the concept of charity, that's come from all religions. We all share the same fundamentals. There's a big one in Sikh, which is called Seva, which is giving back selflessly. And there's a society called Midlands Langar Seva Society in Birmingham, where both of us are from. We know the guys who run it, and they go and feed the homeless. And there's no posting about it like, oh, look at this, and essentially making this about themselves. They're just doing it because they want to give back to the community. And when you're doing things like that for a selfless reason, I think that gets through to people more, and they hold on to that. And there's some people who see that and they think, oh, actually, they're not bad people. And we're not pushing that out, advertising it openly, saying, look how great we are. It's just doing the right thing. And I think if more people preach that again and again, just softly, without saying, this is a Sikh thing, we're like, no, we're just feeding homeless people. If you just strip that out, all of a sudden you're getting to a problem that people are going through, and then compassion kicks in naturally from a human instinct. So I don't necessarily think it's a social thing. I think it's probably an offline thing that needs to be done as well, especially, as you said, to get people that fall down really bad rabbit holes or get radicalized.
And we're talking about content that sits in the digital space, but we've obviously got Desi here as well. And I know Desi a bit, so she won't mind me kind of asking this to you and wanting your honest opinions here. So what do you guys that are creating for digital think about the linear kind of broadcast space? Is that somewhere that you are also wanting to reach content, in terms of millennials as well? Are you just kind of disregarding that as a platform, a space for you?
Again, there are some platforms that I do love, and there are some platforms that don't share the right type of content. Like Swarzy, I was on BBC Radio with her. She's amazing, by the way. You definitely tune in. When I was on BBC Radio, I was able to talk about Eid or talk about Ramadan and talk about my faith because it was accepted. But then there are some corners of the BBC that put out programs that do the complete opposite. But then they also put out shows that are positive, like a series called Man Like Mobeen, which I was also in season 3. Make sure you check that out. And then there's shows on Netflix as well that really do promote positivity. So I think it's like it's a 50-50. It depends where you look, what channel you turn on, but there is a lot of work still to be done.
I was just going to say as well that I really came to the realization 2 weeks ago that you cannot scratch every itch with every platform. Some things radio will just do amazingly. Shouts goes out to Radio 2, who brought in Melodies from Heaven, who recorded about 6 or so songs, live songs for Easter. We played them out. Radio 4 was involved. can I do the same thing on YouTube? Probably, but it probably won't bang or hit as much as it will go out on radio. Cool. The Last Supper Club, there is no way I'm going to cook curry goat and mac and cheese in the studio and have a 3-hour breakfast show, although it probably would do all right because my producer would be very happy, but that's not going to scratch that itch. And so I just find that the linear sort of formats will work for shows that are linear, and other shows and other things that you want to do can just be done all over the place. And that took me a really long time to clock, but now I have done that. I've actually just sat with it really well to think, okay, that's okay. I can now do this and it will be amazing over here, but that just won't sit in a 30-minute slot on radio with 7 2-minute links. We just can't do that. But what can you do that fits that really well? Oh, we can record live music and get a testimony in there, and we can celebrate whatever we're celebrating across Radio 2, Radio 1 Extra, Radio 1. So I just think, yeah, I mean, Daisy and I actually sat in a car in Zipcar on Zoom, and I was like, Daisy, I've got this idea for Last Supper Club, and we should do this. And of course, you've got loads of ideas that come across your slate all the time. And so it's not to be disheartened, it's to say, okay, it's not right now. What can I do to go and do something whilst I'm waiting for maybe a BBC or a whatever platform to come along and say, this is great. But until then, there's no use sitting on your hands. You've got to cook. Otherwise, all the creativity, just like, where do you put it, isn't it? Where do you go with it? So I think, yeah, in the meantime, you just remember, not every platform can scratch that itch, but every platform can look different and still serve and feed the idea that you've got.
And Daisy, how do you, I guess, feel about that in terms of you're seeing kind of digital creators, you're seeing that the audiences that they can tap into that are of interest to you, but there's certain things that you need and require, and there's certain formats and things to adhere to. And yeah, so how do you kind of see relationship and kind of working with digital content creators?
At the moment, I think it's a really rich opportunity for talent that's cutting through online and in digital spaces that we could and should be looking at, and whether that's in existing formats like Pilgrimage or even Race Across the World, not that I look after that, but just big series where you can really bring that voice into the mix. And it's a really good opportunity actually to do some of what we've been talking about, which is bring a faith perspective in a really light touch way through a format. So actually you are prompting a different conversation, or viewers are getting an insight that perhaps they wouldn't have done otherwise. So I think talent is an area that we could and should be looking at. Then I think it's looking at the programs we do commission. What is their life online and what is their digital life beyond that program? How can we bring an audience through clips? When we did Big Zoo Goes to Mecca last year, he was interviewed for a BBC digital and social feeds completely separately away from the programme. That did so well, just went out in short clips, subtitled, and just told people that the programme was there. And I think that's part of the problem and the battle that I have, which I also think is a real challenge, but an opportunity to hook in new audiences, is how do we tell people who consume no BBC platforms at all that material that they might really be interested in is actually there? Again, back to your sort of algorithm point, it's sort of how do we break through? And I think what we can do on existing online platforms and small, easy to digest clips is actually a really good way to do it.
I think we're just going to throw out to the audience a bit. Have we got any questions? Great, I think your hand was up first, sir. So.
Thank you, a really great session, and I've just been online and I've bought your book and sent it to my daughter, which is one of the advantages of having the phone in your pocket. I do a lot of going and speaking in schools about Judaism in York and around Yorkshire because there's no synagogues in that area. And when I talk to the teachers about how they teach about Judaism when there aren't any Jews and there isn't anywhere to go, they say they use BBC Bite Size. And I'm quite nervous in checking that they are using a reputable platform, and the BBC label is very, very good for them. However, I find the content also incredibly dry and incredibly boring. And I'm finding the people on this platform incredibly engaging and exciting, great content makers. So it's really a question to you, Daisy, which is why I'm looking at you. How do we use the kite mark of the BBC, which is really important to teachers, to engage the talent of people like this to speak about their faith with the enthusiasm they have?
Yeah, and I can add something to that.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, just that I work for a company, we make primarily children's TV content and educational content as well. No, it's fine, you criticise away, it's all good. We have just been nominated for a Sanford St Martin Award for an education series for about the world religions. Yeah, I think more has been commissioned in that space, I would say. We've just made that series, that was 18 videos across kind of early years to Key Stage 2. And actually, I just went to the BBC Education briefing, which kind of falls outside of Daisy's remit, which is what I thought I'd just take it for you. But I think the subject they talked about the most in the bite-size commissioning briefing round that they've got coming out now was religion and ethics. So I think it's very much on the radar, is what I was going to say.
Thank you, yeah. Well, very good point. And you're right, it does fall slightly out of my remit, but I can speak a bit about it because I don't disagree that I think trying to engage kids in Key Stage 2 and 3, particularly with religion education, can be a real challenge. I see it with my own children who are of that age. I think there is actually a lot of really good content on BBC Bite Size that is exciting and engaging. Just to support what you're saying about what you do, which is so good. I also agree a lot of it is very fact-based, quite dry, and that isn't going to excite anybody about faith and belief. So how can we do more in the space of the human story, the lived experience, the shared connections that we have, which I think is the human experience. And I do think there is scope to do more of that. There are several different challenges, which is probably beyond the remit of this conversation to go into. I think a lot of that is the way that religious education teachers are taught themselves to teach religion, and sometimes a lack of information and knowledge there. But we are working closely with Bite Size that might reassure you slightly in how we can take some of the long form content I do and break it down into clips that will support curriculum so that they do get some of this human story threaded through what they inevitably have to learn through themes and key facts, but actually done with some clips that do show how that is a lived experience as well.
Hi, thanks for this. It's always great to hear about young people, although curious that it's you talk about millennials rather than Gen Z, who are a lot younger at the moment. I'm from the Board of Deputies of British Jews, and I lead on, amongst other things, our youth engagement. And I've been really interested on these discussions that you've been having about short form content, but also about how much that very much can lead to so much polarization, specifically amongst Gen Z and younger. And I'm interested to hear what kind of things you're thinking about of maybe how to counter that. And if I may ask a second question, how much, if any, interfaith work do you do in this content that you produce?
I'll take the interfaith point. There's a lot of disagreements in the brown community that I can comment on. So there's a lot of historical issues that Sikhs have been through with Muslims, unfortunately, and that's actually taught to some kids quite early on, and they're taught to not like other Muslims or other Hindus, and they're just taught to only stay within their own community. What we've tried to do is to welcome other friends of ours who are Muslims, Hindus, etc., and to show we have an absolute butt ton in common compared to the stuff that we've been taught to not like against one another. So we really are conscious of that, and we don't want to ever bring division to our community or to others, because we see others do it for rage bait or engagement, and we're not really into that. However, there is a game you have to play on social media, and I'm sure you can attest to this as well, which is you have to engage people in the first 2 or 3 seconds. So you have clickbait and like semi-clickbait indulgence where you say, you won't believe this, and then they're like, what won't I believe? And then it's the most benign point. But you have to do that to get people's attention, especially when they're younger, because their attention spans are a little bit fried. So we have to be really cognizant of that and use that ethically. And people have said to us, a lot of your titles are clickbait. And I said, okay, but do I deliver on it? And they say yes. So I'm saying, well, I have to play the game. And that's unfortunately how it goes.
Yeah, just that, I guess then the other thing though is, I feel like I'm going to sound like, not like a baby millennial, but like sort of geriatric millennial with this stuff. But that social media is one tool among many we have for understanding things. And I think there are other modes, like we all have like briefly talked about like kind of our religious backgrounds, and we have these like extraordinary holy texts that are like challenging and difficult, but also things that we should be struggling with. And so that thing of saying to young people, enjoy all this brilliant stuff, you can hear amazing conversations, music, short form content videos, but hey, also what happens if we put that thing, as you said, away in another room for a bit and you work with these texts? Because I think, to go to your point as well, my religious education at school was so rubbish. I remember just like doing diagrams of all the different religions, like sacred spaces, and being like, oh yeah, that's, you know, where you pray. And, you know, and that's like not telling you anything. And getting to read a book, like, why don't you read a book by a Zoroastrian, which is what I had this mad teacher at school who told me to do that. And suddenly I had this sense of that faith. And then I got to go to the only fire temple in London, which is this like in an old cinema, and it's like a beautiful place, and got to meet Iranian Indians or Zoroastrians, and like this thing about allowing young people to be explorers and discoverers, because that's what they want to do, and be thoughtful and slow and read text and think with text. It feels that we have to do that alongside also showing them like this world in which they are like digital natives as well.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I noticed the most about the Gen Z millennial audience as well, maybe as a difference to older, is that the route of entry is they want to be immersed in a world rather than a kind of, you know, let's peer in together and look in. And I think like they're not bothered if that opinion and that world is completely different from their own, but they're very happy to sit for quite a long time in the world of someone else. So I think, yeah.
Hi. Thank you so much for your representation, Dr. Jazz, because I'm also a resident doctor and I'm due to be ordained in the Church of England in a couple of weeks. So I just love all that faith and medicine coming together. I think my main question also is I think it's for Indy as well, because you said something about playing the attention game, and you kind of have to catch that within the first 3 minutes. But what's really important across all faiths is embodiment, and I think we can see that with how that's reflecting on anxiety with the young people, just being in person. Because I love what you said about the Last Supper Club and people having dinner whilst they're watching you having dinner. So if you're playing the attention game as content creators, how are you going to encourage people to be in person as well? Because you kind of have a vested interest in them staying on the platform to watch your content. So how do you hold that contradiction between, I want you to stay here and watch my content, but I also want you to be in person and live out your faith?
I think the key thing here, I hope you don't mind me stepping in, is when you mentioned about grabbing attention in the first 3 seconds, it is true. I'm guilty of doing that as well, but it is, again, the game you have to play. But a lot of young people, Gen Zs, even millennials, to be honest, once they discover you through short-form content, they get invested. It takes about maybe 5 or 6 videos for them to see, often for them to click follow. And then once they're engaged in your content, they want to see more. Once they want to see more, you announce that you're doing a live show, they'll attend. Because a lot of podcasts nowadays, they are half an hour long. Some podcasts get really, really popular to the point they do a live podcast, and people have live podcasts on stage, and those young people that follow that podcast actually turn up and watch. And it's the same thing with music artists. You know, artists have they release mixtapes, albums, and then they say, I'm doing a live show. People attend. So I think there is a step to go further. And once you build that community, they do show up. They really do.
That's exactly our plan, by the way. It's to migrate to live shows. Exactly what he said there. There's this sub kind of algorithm which is like trust know, which exists online, and it's building that trust with the community, but then creating physical spaces. So for example, every quarter we have a live kind of private member area where if you have subscribed, it's not that much, you come in, you can actually speak to us. If people send us messages, Indy will normally reply. I will send voice notes. I hate typing, so I will try and interact in real with people. But ultimately, yes, doing live shows, bringing people together, but it only comes from the short. The only reason we have short form is to push people to long form, because nobody's going to go watch an hour on YouTube. It's just too much engagement and too much, I don't know who you are. When we started the podcast, and this is advice for anybody who wants to start a podcast, you start and you think you're Joe Rogan. You think I can talk about anything and people will care. The best bit of advice I give people, no one cares who you are and no one cares about what you're talking about initially. And all it is you're consistent, people are like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe. And then eventually that just becomes, oh, I like these guys. And then it just happens. It's not there and then it is there.
Just to add to the real world thing as well, I think Doctor and I are really cognizant of this as well. So we'll go to our religious festivals, people will see us there. He teaches at his local Gurdwara as well on weekends or whenever he can to give back to younger kids to instill the right messages in them. So there is an effort there that we can try and do. For those people who are at like insane levels of popularity, I don't think that's possible. But for us, for now, as we can do that, we will definitely keep trying to do that. And if somebody wants to stop and talk to me in the street, I'll give them as much time as I can. and I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm really awkward about it. I find it very uncomfortable. I still find it really uncomfortable, but I know it means a lot to somebody else to give them that time and energy. So trying to break that digital barrier as well is important to us.
Hi, Gavin Drake. I'm a journalist, and we've heard today about religious illiteracy in parts of the media, certainly the journalism part. I wonder whether, this is a question for Desi, I wonder whether the same applies to other aspects of the media. I've got a brilliant sense of humour. My stepchildren say I haven't. But I like religious jokes. Now I'm thinking back to the Jackie Mason, the great Jewish comedian. I'm thinking Dave Allen, who took the mick out to the Catholic Church, and others. Is there a fear amongst broadcasters to put religious comedy on mainstream? Because I'm not familiar with these guys' work, but I want to find out because they've enthused in the way they've talked about their humour and the work that they do. Is there a fear of broadcasters to put religious humour on the mainstream?
I'm sure did you say your children say you don't have a sense of humour? I'm sure they're wrong. No, far from it. It's actually, and if you've got an idea, we should chat afterwards. It's a space that we've been looking for ideas in because we see that religion and comedy are natural bedfellows and that content does bring an audience who doesn't love to have a laugh while they're obviously discussing some of the things that could be most important, most difficult for us to talk about. I've already mentioned the Big Zoo film that we did. I mean, he's a very funny man, and he really brought that sense of humour to something that's actually really very serious. Paul, who's here and is on after us, we've had him on Sunday Morning Live more than once because his humour and the way he can talk about world events with a real sort of comedic touch just connects with viewers. So it is something that we know does work. So I'd say that there is no reticence or fear of doing it, but as always, it's about what are the right ideas. I don't know if you remember a while ago, there was, it was quite a long time now, Channel 4 had a brief 10-minute series called Jews at 10. Do you remember that? It was brilliant and really funny, and I've wanted to do something in that space again ever since. So yeah, all ideas welcome.
Being waved at a bit, but I want to just ask a last question of everyone, which is just to send this room off, I guess, inspired. Those of you that are content makers, what can you share? I'm hoping for exclusives here, maybe. I'm looking at you, Islah. Things that you're working on currently or dreaming about or excited to make in this kind of faith content space. Anyone?
All heads turn to me. So, I mean, I'm always working on content on YouTube, on social media. If someone tells me I can't do something, I don't listen. I do it anyway. If I have a budget or not, I do it regardless. But one film I have been working on, I'm writing it with my best friend. Currently, just writing it. Got a lot of interest, and again, I mean, you can obviously vouch it. It's a long process to go through meetings and rejections. So yeah, it's on the table. If someone tells me I can't do it, I'll do it anyway. But yeah, I'm constantly just making stuff online all the time.
We've got coming out later this month on the 25th on BBC One at 9 o'clock, film with the Mole Rajan going to the Ganges. And the reason I mention that is it's quite interesting for what we've talked a bit about today, which is how you bring the secular and the religious together to try and connect with a broad audience. Amol's the first person to say he was raised a Hindu. He has deep respect for the faith. It was the faith of his parents and his dad, who sadly lost 3 years ago, but he himself would call himself an atheist. So he's going to look at what that faith might bring him as someone who doesn't believe in God, but at a time when he's at a real crossroads in his life and trying to deal with the loss of his father. So yeah, how is religion a resource for people regardless of faith?
I guess, yeah, in a slightly different space, I very slowly just state a project that will hopefully one day become another book. But in terms of the faith stuff, I guess what writing about Christianity has done is whet my appetite, or at least given me a slight lens to start to talk to other people about faiths of other backgrounds and other faith backgrounds, because suddenly it's oh, I have this framework for what belief might start to mean. And I don't know, as soon as you start thinking about Christianity, obviously you're thinking about all the Abrahamic religions because they're so intertwined and interconnected. So to me that feels exciting, because it's any big work you do is going to change you a bit, any project you're involved in, and that feeling of being oh, how do I use and go forward with this stuff that started to change how I think about things. And I guess I would like to do oh, maybe it's gone, person over there, there's something more about interfaith stuff, because I've never been more excited or enthused writing about anything than I have faith before. And as a writer who writes big, slow books that are I don't know, that there's something about having a subject like faith and belief and how we do that all together and how we find meaning together. Nothing makes me more excited. So hopefully more of that.
yes, I am, by God's grace, hoping to shoot the next series of The Last Supper Club. So, yeah, just trying to get the menu together. And I do just want to shout out someone who might be on, who I haven't mentioned him yet. My RE teacher, Mr. Ayres, should be sitting on this table because he worked with the Songs of Praise team. And so when I walked in, they were like, oh, Bob isn't here. And I was like, who's Bob? He was like, Bob Ayres. I was like, I never would call my RE teacher by his first name. And so, yeah, welcoming a few more guests to just sit and have dinner. But doing that regularly, actually, because I just think inviting people to have dinner absolutely just levels all of the table to hear people's experiences. And so, yeah, that's what I'm hoping to be working on next.
So my daughter, who's 18 months old, loves watching Miss Rachel. I don't know if you guys have heard of Miss Rachel, but she's very engaging, and I find myself singing along to her songs now every single day. So something that I want to do, kind of along the bite-sized kind of theme, is so I have found when I'm teaching children, it's you have to meet them where they are. Because the way I used to teach was the most up-to-date thing that I've learned, the most complex theory I want to tell kids, I want to tell you the most up-to-date knowledge I have. And it just wasn't going anywhere. But then I learned if you meet them where they are, they're much more engaged, they find it, they go down their own rabbit hole. So telling Sikh stories and making it in a way where it's engaging with good animation and just storytelling so they get it, that's what I want to do. So there's a good gateway in. That's the thing we're working on.
All right.
You happy?
All good. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, guys. Let's give them a big round of applause, please.